Alright, what's going on guys, it's Epoxy, and here in this video we'll be going over an overwhelming amount of new Cyberpunk 2077 info that I think you're all going to love. This will be by far my largest info dump video yet, so without further ado, let's roll the intro. What better way is there to start off this video than what is, at least currently, the title screen for Cyberpunk 2077 that was posted by Fabian Mario, public relations for Cyberpunk 2077. Now to be clear, this is just a development build of the game and can most definitely change before launch, but was interesting to see nonetheless. CD Projekt Red has also been kind enough to share some more location art, first of which was for Heywood, a neighborhood of contrast, from modern skyscrapers and parks in the north to dangerous, inhospitable slums in the south. It's, in quotes, the biggest bedroom in Night City, where gangs like Valentino's and 6th Street get down to business, legal and illegal alike. They also shared some more on the Badlands, sparsely populated by nomads. The Badlands are the vast plains outside of the city proper. Unchecked resource extraction, burning oil fields, rampant pollution. This district makes Night City feel like a rich oasis, but it holds golden opportunities for those in the know. But of course, officially released art isn't everything we got to see over the last week, because Kalenko and MeFree on Twitter got early copies of the World of Cyberpunk art book, and both have shared loads of new art for the game for all of us to enjoy. So I'll be sure to link both of their Twitter accounts in the description. Let's begin with Vista Del Rey and the Glen, two of the subdistricts in Heywood. After Night City got taken over by corporations, the government moved to Glen. It's now a state-owned subdistrict with a town hall, mayor's office, court, and for what it's worth, a big NCPD station. Vista Del Rey, on the other hand, is the poorest of the district. It's heavily underinvested, crime-ridden, and slowly descending further into chaos, with many residents moving to other locations and more gang members moving in to the empty void. However, we also got to see an outdoor market in Wellsprings, another sub-district in Heywood, which, as I'm sure you can tell just by the looks of it, is the safest part of Heywood, but is still full of working stiffs and underpaid corporate employees. Now, as a connection to the latest look at the Badlands by CD Projekt Red, here is a concept art of an oil field in the northern outskirts of Night City, something we are guaranteed to see in our exploration of the Badlands. Now, back to the city, we have a new look at Rancho Coronado, subdistrict of Santo Domingo. It is the place in which the workers from Arroyo call home, a self-sufficient housing district with dozens of identical homes. This neighborhood is reminiscent of the traditional American homes of the early 20th century. As for an in-game look at this sub-district, it seems we have already gotten one, as you can see in this image on screen. Not only is the housing layout identical, but the background as well. It even has some of these circular billboards that we can see in the concept art. We can also see that there is 6th Street presence, which further indicates that this is in Rancho Coronado, as 6th Street holds a presence in Santo Domingo. Next up is Kabuki, sub-district in Watson. Kabuki was originally a large Japanese community in the Watson district. Over time, the area was overrun with and taken over by other Asian immigrants, changing the location from a Japanese community to a crime-ridden area. We've actually seen not only other concept art of this location, but we even got a sneak peek at it in-game within the latest gig trailer, and it looks really cool. I think what's doing it for me is that massive statue. We also got another look at the North Oak concept art, which is the location to be for the famous and rich in Westbrook. In fact, in all of Night City. Not only does it lack any gang presence, but it's all green land that has large estates, casinos and clubs, and the nicest pools I've ever seen. Japantown is also a sub-district in Westbrook, and although it still has a gang presence, it is still the place to go if you've got the eddies. It's chock full of gaming parlors, street food stands, and capsule hotels. It also lies very close to the city center. In fact, we've caught a short glimpse of Japantown most recently in the gig trailer, and I'd have to say this is arguably one of the most cyberpunk looking locations in the game. Now, we also got a look at Corpo Plaza, which is a sub-district within city center, specifically for Corpo scum. Reaching for the sky with its brutal corporate skyscrapers and blinding floodlights, this is the heart of the district and the home to some of the biggest corporations, such as Arasaka, Militech, Biotechnica, Petrochem, and King Tao. We actually recently got another concept art of this location that I covered in a previous video, but on top of that, we also got another look at the Arasaka building, which looks very fascinating. And while we're on the topic of location, locations, here's a dope, luxurious apartment with a brain dance station in the living room, and a tiger that's just casually chilling next to the couch. Now, with all of the information we have on the districts, what does the actual Cyberpunk 2077 map of Night City look like? Well, thanks to Kalenko, the community was able to stitch together the multiple segments of the official map in the art book to give us a true visual representation of the map of Night City. Of course, fully labeled. And again, official. We've seen the community do mock-ups of the map before, but they weren't 100% accurate, and it's nice to get a more official look at the majority of the map anyways. Interestingly enough, the Cyberpunk community has also done the work of attempting to compare Night City to Los Santos from GTA 5. People love comparing this game to Grand Theft Auto. Now, keep in mind, GTA 5 also has the surrounding area that isn't included in this comparison, but it's quite empty, much like that of the Badlands, which are also not very well represented in the map of Night City. The important thing to note here is the size of the city itself, which based on this bound to be slightly inaccurate comparison, Night City is quite a bit larger. You also have to remember that Night City will offer a load of interiors and verticality in buildings, unlike that of GTA 5. So it's looking like Cyberpunk 2077's map is going to be massive. GTA 5's map was already quite impressive for the time, so I can't even imagine how much there will be to explore in this game. And now I think it's time we take a look at some of the things to fill the world of Night City. Let's begin with all the weapon manufacturers, as we now have a crystal clear look at the page that we discussed in a previous video. That includes Arasaka, Tsunami Arms, Kang Tao, Militech, Midnight Arms, Malorian, Text Punka, Constitutional Arms, Nakota Manufacturing, Dara Polytechnic, Rostovic, and Budget Arms. To be clear, you won't see others such as Federated Arms listed here, as they don't seem to manufacture their own weapons for the game, just special variants. This is seen in the case of the Federated Arms Vindicator as an example, which is just a rare variant of the Militech M10AF Lexington. So it seems this is a full list of the true weapon manufacturers in Cyberpunk 2077, some of which we also got some weapon concepts for. First of which is a Malorian Arms handgun, which looks clean as fuck. I've also got super colorful katanas by Arasaka that look like plastic, and according to some, well, I'm sure you can gather what some people compared these to. A combat knife that can hold cartridges filled with neurotoxin, which adds some more depth to melee. And while slightly unrelated, we also got a look at tech ammo. So it will be interesting to see if there is different ammo types you can use with weapons, like that of Fallout New Vegas, or if this kind of ammo is used with a specific weapon. Again, this is concept. Also, while on the topic of weapon manufacturers, here's a quality and family-friendly advertisement for Budget Arms. Now, we also got a list of all of the vehicle manufacturers in Cyberpunk 2077, which includes Herrera, Rayfield, Thornton, Archer, Mizutani, Vilfort, Chevion, Quadra, Mahir Motors, Makigai, Yeba, and Brennan. Now, of course, we didn't just get a list of the vehicle manufacturers, we also got a look at some of their vehicles. Starting with a beautiful, exotic, and luxurious car by Herrera, a Spanish manufacturer of luxurious cars for the upper class. Then we also got a look at a car manufactured by Archer, which manufactures everyday utilitarian vehicles for the general public consumer base. Next is a bike manufactured by Yeba, which is a Japanese automotive manufacturer in the game, and a truck manufactured by Thornton, who also manufactures everyday utilitarian vehicles for the general public consumer base. Their slogan, though, is "First car to blend in." Of course, one of the most important things to fill Night City is the gangs and characters that give it life. So I think it's about time we discuss those that we got a look at from the world of Cyberpunk. Starting with Mr. Richard Knight, the founder of Night City. This man has a lot of lore behind him, but for the sake of not turning this into a 30-minute lore segment about the creation of Night City, I'll let his name, look, and title do the talking. We also got a look at the legendary Cyberpunk character, Rogue. She was a solo and later became one of the best fixers in Night City. She's the current owner of the Afterlife Bar in Watson, and yes, she is confirmed to be in the game. Oh, and while we're at it, here's a brief look at Judy Alvarez in the book. And since Judy is a brain dance technician and editor, we might as well take a look at the gadget related to her expertise, that being a close look at the brain dance editing glove manufactured by Militech. As for the gangs, we got a look at the Tiger Claws, a defensive combat gang who claims turf in Japantown and the residential community surrounding it. They generally do not use most cyberware, preferring to rely on martial arts, traditional Japanese weapons, and enhanced reflexes. To take their badass to another level, we also got a sick photo of one of them riding a Yeba bike and wielding a katana. We also got a clearer look at the Valentinos, which are a poser gang dedicated to seducing the most attractive women in Night City. They do not maintain any turf and have no goals outside of seducing women. They are generally harmless to anyone except the husbands and boyfriends of very attractive women in the city. So probably one of the most weird gangs in Night City. Next is the Scavengers, which are well known for kidnapping people and forcibly harvesting their cyberware, as seen in the beginning of the 2018 gameplay demo. Speaking of which, we also got a closer look at the Maelstrom, located in the all-food plant in Night City. They only have about 30 to 40 active members and are led by Royce. And the Maelstrom's territory is the industrial part of Watson. I think one of their members being named Dum Dum is quite indicative of their low active member count. As for the 6th Street, they were founded by veterans of the 4th Corporate War, tired of the helplessness of the NCPD, meant to serve and protect the community of Vista del Rey, but today their interpretation of the law and bringing justice to the city is questionable and self-serving. Now for the most intimidating gang, the Voodoo Boys, which is a terrorist gang of drug dealers. They engage in weird magic rituals and deal non-synthetic drugs to students near the university. Sadistic and pitiless, they will kill, torture, and rape for any reason or no reason at all. Not a gang you really want to mess with. However, there is one other gang that loves to mess with them, that being the Animals, who seem to have the balls to be involved in a gang war with the Voodoo Boys. We got to see the Animals in action in the classic Cyberpunk 2077 deep dive. And then we have the Mox, those who protect working girls and guys from violence and abuse. They are based in Lizzie's Bar and are led by Judy Alvarez. And moving on to the Nomad factions, we have another look at the Aldecados, one of the 2 Nomad factions inhabiting the Badlands. And for an interesting turn, here's a kid with a baseball bat behind his back. Then we have the Wraiths, a gang of Raph and Shiv in Night City. The Wraiths are second of the 2 nomad groups inhabiting the Badlands. They have a long history of frequent conflict and warring with the other nomad group, the Aldecados. We also got a look at some more miscellaneous art, such as the visualization of the data flow in the net, Militech troops in South America back during the 4th Corporate War in July 2022, a look at the Militech helmets, level 5 Netrunner equipment worn by a Netwatch agent, which has cyberware with its own cooling system, an NCPD advertisement, and last, a design of the Arasaka soldiers. Now, what about the kinds of goofy advertisements we can expect in Night City? We've seen quite a few before, but we have gotten a look at a few new ones. So here's the corporations we've seen them from. Captain Caliente, All World Insurance, Revere Courier Services, All Foods, Real Water, and previously mentioned Budget Arms. Cyberpunk 2077's advertisements are quite out there, so they should be very humorous to come across in the game. Now, that is everything we have seen so far from the World of Cyberpunk art book, but that's not it for this info dump, because it just keeps on going. So next, let's take a look at the ultra expensive Trauma Team Elite Response Unit figure, a 15-inch hand-painted figure of Mason and Nadia. Nadia is confirmed to be the leading character in the Cyberpunk 2077 Trauma Team comic series. She is a citizen of Night City and the sole survivor of a failed rescue mission for the Trauma Team International Corporation. After she agrees to continue work for an upcoming extraction mission, Nadia and her team find themselves in an even more dangerous and life-threatening situation. Soon they'll discover Trauma Team is not what it seems, Mason likely being featured as a part of her team in the series. So both of these characters could very well be in the game itself, but for that, we'll have to wait and see. I do want to note for anyone that is blown away by the cost, like I was personally, that it is in line with the typical cost of statues of this size and detail. So not really anything to get upset over, it's just really expensive to get this sort of thing. So I know I can't afford it, as the upfront cost, tax, and shipping would make it more expensive than a next-gen console. I don't have enough Canadian pesos for that, so I won't be getting it for myself. As for some interesting voice actor news, we got to learn that Michał Zabrowski, the actor who played The Witcher in the 2001 Polish film, is voicing Johnny Silverhand in the Polish dub of Cyberpunk 2077. I thought that was a cool bit of news worth sharing in this video. Something that is most definitely worth sharing in this video is 2 exclusive screenshots we got from Famitsu 2020. While they aren't loaded with information, they are still worth a look nonetheless. Now let's take a deep dive into a ton of new information on the game that we have received from Paul Sasko, lead quest designer for Cyberpunk 2077, in an interview by Spider's Web. Keep in mind, this is all translated from Polish by Reddit user Siobhan. With that said, let's begin with the story length and general quest structure. Cyberpunk's structure was built on the foundation set by the lessons we learned from our work on The Witcher 3. The Witcher had main story as its core, with several subplots branching out of it. That was the basic structure, which we called a wheat spike. In Cyberpunk, we added another non-linear layer to it in the form of these subplots that serve as quests, which can be triggered in various circumstances. Those quests are not set up in a linear fashion. We are using an internal system, so-called token system, which decides on whenever the game is supposed to give you those quests. That means that even I couldn't tell you in what kind of order those quests will trigger for you, because the game itself will decide on that based on your current progress. Of course, we are still holding the reins and decide upon what kind of conditions need to be fulfilled for that particular quest to trigger. But the process itself is very difficult to explain. The game has the most complex structure that we have ever done. Looking back, in the case of The Witcher 3, some players and journalists had an issue with the main plot being too long, around the Battle of Kaer Morhen, and right after it there was this feeling of upcoming finality, but it ended up feeling too stretched out. That was one of the issues we wanted to avoid while creating Cyberpunk's main story. That additional time we got by making the main story slightly shorter, we spend on the subplots. So in Cyberpunk's structure, we have this wheat spike, which serves as its center. The main storyline with different subplots surrounding it, which can be triggered in various ways. Those subplots allow us to do something that we have never done before. They change the main plot of the game, and they are doing that in such a way that you may not even finish the main plot, but still finish the game and get a completely different epilogue than the player with a different life path who made different choices, met different characters, and formed relationships with them. The game's non-linear nature is present on several levels. Because of that, it's hard for me to tell how long exactly it will take for the player to finish the main story. Regarding of how many subplots we prepared, at this moment, looking just at the story content that has been handcrafted by my team, they are equal in length to the main story, even a little longer than that. Everything depends on the playstyle chosen by the player. When people play the game as a solo, they tend to finish the game faster than players who prefer a more silent approach and, for example, avoid killing people, which means their playthrough will be quite longer. That quest inside the All Food Factory with the Maelstrom gang, Dum Dum and Royce, which you were playing through, offers 12 different paths, and those paths vary in terms of length. Depending on your chosen path, the quest will have a different length, and because of that, it's hard to answer this question. So that was absolutely loaded, but to break it down, Cyberpunk 2077's storyline is going to be heavily influenced by the player, and the likelihood of players experiencing the exact same path are very slim. You can follow one of the game's subplots and essentially finish the game because of the events that occur in that subpath. So the base main plot likely doesn't make sense to finish in that scenario. I'd say look at it sort of like different paths you can take in a game like Fallout New Vegas. Depending on the actions you take with a faction in the game, you will experience different events, or some of the same events but from a different perspective. It's essentially a much more complex system than that, as it's not just direct paths, but many different paths in a huge spider web that can lead you in different directions, all based on your actions and choices. Sometimes you'll skip events with your choices, sometimes you'll add extra events. Some of the paths will be longer, some of the paths will be shorter. I think the system is what will truly add a load of replay value to the game, as you never truly know where your choices will lead. Next is about whether you can finish the game without killing a single person. And while we've heard that you can do a non-lethal run, this gives us a little bit more details on just how that will work. Oh yes, very much so. The most important choices in the game, all the bosses and elite enemies, there is always some way to avoid a bloodshed. Sometimes violence and enemy encounter is unavoidable, but it's not like you are forced to tear your opponents apart. But also you can't avoid the combat entirely. However, you are able to fight in such a way to neutralize your enemies without killing them and finish the game this way. We also got more info about life paths. So to start off, the interviewer asked the following question. So how much of an impact does the choice of our character upbringing have on the story? Is it just a window dressing and some additional dialogue options, or does it open up alternative paths? Here is Powell's response. When you choose your life path, as a player, you define who you are. As designers, we need to be aware of that throughout the entire experience. At the start of the game, you will have a completely different quest. Start your adventure in a different place, and meet Jackie in a different circumstance. At some point, the story narrows down a bit. Then, depending on your backstory, you will get access to quests, which you wouldn't get with a different life path, and that's the first difference. The second one is that you have certain options during the quests which are unique to your life path. I don't know who you were playing as. And here is where the back and forth began on just how complicated this quest is. So the interviewer responded saying that they played as a Corpo. Powell Sasko responded saying, "Oh, when you talk to Meredith Stout, have you tried using your life path related dialogue options?" The interviewer said, "Yes, I noticed there was an additional option there." Powell then asked, "And who did you meet in the end of your quest?" The interviewer responded saying, "I told the gang about the virus." Powell then responded saying, "Okay, so you decided to betray Meredith. This is when your life path becomes the most visible. When you interact with other Corpos, your knowledge allows you to choose the options unique to your life path. That has its own consequences later on. That's just one example of how the additional option in a single scene can open up another branching path for the entire quest." The interviewer then asked, "So if I chose another life path, I wouldn't be able to make the quest play out this way?" And Powell responded, "That's right. You encountered people from the Corp, so your Corpo knowledge made a difference. But I can tell you that Nomad has an access to something that Corpo does not. As a Nomad, you would be able to obtain the convoy's signatures, since Nomads specialize in robbing those, since they themselves live in convoys, traveling with their cars and bikes. As a Nomad, you know how to steal the convoy signatures, and then you can use that information to trigger another path. As designers, we are always looking for ways to provide the player with role-playing options. Those different possibilities don't give you a completely different ending, but by sticking to this particular life path, as a Nomad, you will be dealing with people like you. It's the same for the other life paths. They all have their own custom epilogues. What's important is that you can change your path. As a street kid or Corpo, you can start working with Nomads, play through the game this way, and end the game as a Nomad. But if you start the game as a Nomad and then end the game as a Nomad, you will receive additional paths and parts of the story. It shows that there are many layers to that. So the life paths aren't just silly choices that are going to change the beginning of the game. They are going to have effects on the rest of your game. Now, for anyone worried about if they were forced to make changes to in-game content based on the recent events, here's what Sasko had to say. "It's important to note that we have a fully recorded game. For a long time now, in fact. It's in the final stage of development, during which we don't make any changes to the story we are telling. We don't add anything to it, we don't remove anything from it. Those events, as you said, took place very recently. The second thing is that Cyberpunk and The Witcher are the games which present our studio's philosophy. The game we are working on, while still being a form of entertainment, for us is also a piece of art. It's our vision. It's hard to imagine any event that would make us change something or move something around just to avoid touching on certain subjects. Anyway, you probably already saw in the game some parts that touch upon those subjects, so you were able to see that for yourself. For me, it's important to deliver the complete piece of work, the way we intended. As a studio, we are a group of people with different views on politics, religion, spiritual life, existential matters, also when it comes to sexual orientations or political beliefs. As a studio, we are always aiming to cultivate our openness by allowing anyone to voice their own opinion and to represent all sorts of views, as long as it's within the boundaries of law and reason. So anyone could find something for themselves and find the answers for their own questions. For me and my team, the game is a piece of art, and I stand by that. That's what I always say to my designers. I don't feel like I'm making a product, but rather like if I was painting a picture or were to compose music, create stories, movies. For me, that's art. And in our case, the art or the stories we are telling to our players, and that's the most important thing to me. So take that however you want. And while that's the end of the interview, we have one more cool detail to mention before this video ends. That being some information on Evelyn Parker, who was most recently featured in the gig trailer and a post by CD Projekt Red. And that is that she has a cyber weapon called Rippers. This was pointed out by Juan Novak on Reddit. For those of you that don't know, Rippers are longer, heavier versions of Scratchers. The top two joints of each finger are replaced with a plastic and metal sheath, in which 3-inch carbo glass claws are housed. The Rippers can be extended by clawing the hand in a cat-like fashion. Most people wear false fingernails over their Rippers, making them much harder to spot. Rippers are considered a form of black market cybertech, and as such is not accessible through the average on-the-mall clinic. Rippers cut in all directions and are considered edged weapons for armor-piercing purposes. And while that about wraps it up for this massive Cyberpunk 2077 info dump video, just know I'll have another Cyberpunk 2077 video releasing very soon. If you manage to watch this entire thing, just know that I absolutely love you for the amount of support. But that's it for this video. I hope you all enjoyed. If you did, please smack that like button down below, subscribe to Leave Fight if you haven't already, and ring that bell icon to stay updated in all of my future videos. It would be super greatly appreciated as always, and until next time, this is Epoxy signing off.